Hi again. In this lesson, we're going to work on alert controllers. And we use alert controllers to pop some sort of a dialog box to our users. So a user can, based on that, make a decision when something goes wrong, or where a user has to log into something, or perhaps when a user has to enter some sort of text value. So let's get started and see how we're going to do that. I'm going to go to Xcode. I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to call it Alert Controller App. And to produce an alert controller, we don't actually need to do anything in our storyboard. So I'm going to jump right into view controller and start programming it. The basics of it are actually rather simple. I'm going to come in here, and usually you want to instigate your alert controller using some sort of event, such as when the user taps on a button, or when some data is read and finished from a network. So it should be essentially initialized after something happens. In here, just to simplify my life and lower the amount of code, I'm going to put it in the touches ended. But you can imagine the very same thing applies in wherever, whether you're pressing a button or you're waiting for a function to finish. In any situation, you can do all of these things. Now, I don't need my view did load, so I'm going to delete that. So I have less code and less stuff here. So the first part of it is going to be producing a new alert controller. So I'm going to say let my alert to be UI alert controller. And for my UI alert controller, I'm going to have to initialize it with some settings. I'm going to initialize with this one, with a title, with a message, and a style. So I'm going to say, let's format everything properly. And I'm going to say the title of it is something happened. And then the message of it is, what would you like to do? Imagine this is a message that says your network connection disconnected, or you are now logged out, or anything of the sorts. And then you have a style, and there are two primary styles for it. One style is an alert that pops in the middle of the screen, and the other one is an action sheet, which essentially produce it from the bottom of the screen. It slides in from the bottom of the screen. I'm going to use both of them so we get a sense of how they work. So the first one is alert. Now that I have an alert controller, I can present it in my view controller. So I'm going to go ahead and say self.present, and in the present I'm going to say present my alert and do it animated true, and don't do anything at completion, nil. So let me stack this. And that's all we have to do to make a very, very basic alert controller. Let's run this application. Obviously, this doesn't really do anything for us just yet, but it shows us the foundations of what we have to do. So here it is. Anytime that I touch on the screen, I should get this alert. So I tap, and the alert screen shows up. It says something happened, what would you like to do? And unfortunately, because I'm not a very good programmer, I don't have any buttons. There's no way to dismiss it. It's just stuck there. So let's go ahead and fix those stuff. And before I do that, you might have noticed that I'm using a different simulator, and theoretically it doesn't really make any difference up until this point, and for a long time coming actually. It doesn't really matter which kind of the simulator you use. I used to use iPhone 8, now I am stuck with iPhone 10 because I was doing some project, but we won't have anything that is specific to iPhone 10 or iPhone 8. If the time comes and I have to do something that is specific to iPhone 10, I will mention it to you and I will remind you about that. Otherwise, you can continue with the one you had, or you can switch it up in here. And if you don't remember, you can go to Window, Devices and Simulators. And in here in the simulators, you can choose the simulator that you want, or you can add one. Now, back to our alert controller. The first thing I need to do is I need to add an action to it. So I'm going to say let, and let's call this one OK action. Let's say we have an OK action and a cancel action. So OK action becomes a UI alert action. And for the action, I will again need to initialize it with some settings. So the first part of these settings is the title that says, okay, for whatever you're asking me, I'm fine with it. And then we have a style that I'm going to put this style at default. And then we have a handler, which essentially says, if you press this OK button, what should I do? Which is very, very important. So I'm going to say, let's call this one my alert action, or my alert in here. And then say, if that did happen, let's go ahead and say, I'm not going to do anything right now. I'm just going to say print you tapped OK. Maybe later we'll do something a little bit more elaborate on it. Now that I have this new action, I'm going to go ahead and say my alert dot add action, and I want to add the OK action to it. And that's all we have to do. So let's go ahead and run. And this time when our pop-up shows up, we should have a button that says OK. And then based on that, we could decide about what we want to do. Now, I want you to pay attention to something that built into any button, there is the dismiss. So you don't have to manually dismiss the alert. So when you tap on it, it automatically does dismiss. Let me clear my console so we can see what we're going to see. And when I tap OK, in here it says you tapped OK. And in here, the interface actually disappears. It dismisses the alert controller. Now, this was all good. Let's add another one to it. I'm going to add another action saying my alert dot add action, and I'm going to make the action on the fly saying UI alert action, UI alert action, and that is going to be a string of it is cancel, the title of it, the style of it is cancel style, and it doesn't do anything. It just dismisses the view controller, which is the alert. So this one actually does something for us. This is the part that we are interested in knowing what happens when we tap. This is the one that we just want to dismiss the alert controller. Now, if I run this application now, you can imagine there are two buttons. One of them is saying OK. One of them is saying cancel. Both of them, they do dismiss, but one of them also does something. So the last thing I want to do in here is I want to add another entity to my alert controller, and that is a text field. In case you wanted to add a value and you want to allow your user to add content to it, you could essentially subclass the alert controller and add anything that you want into it, but that doesn't seem like a very good idea. The default behavior is a title, a description, and some text fields. So let's go ahead in here. And I'm going to do this before my actions, even though it doesn't matter. I'm just going to make sure that it happens right after the alert. And here I'm going to say my alert dot add the text field. And then it says, well, the text field you want to add, give me the configuration for it. I'm going to call this one name text field. Let's assume that we have a name text field and we have a password text field. And for this name text field, I'm going to just change some of its attributes. Let's say name text field dot text alignment becomes ns text alignment dot center, and that's about that. You can infer the rest of it yourself, that you can add anything that a normal text field has into here. So if we run the application now, we will get an alert with two buttons as well as a text field, which is great. So in here, if I touch, we get a text field and two buttons. And as you can imagine, the size and the background color and everything about this text field, you can manually modify it. Maybe I add one more setting in here so that it is more easily viewable. So I'm going to say name.font is UI font.system font of size, and I'm going to increase it to 24. So it's much larger and it's more visible. Now, the question becomes, if we had these text fields, how are we going to get access to them at any point? And that point primarily is when you press either of these buttons. So in here, when I press the OK button, I want to find out what user has entered on the text field. So I'm going to come in here and say, you tapped OK, and I'm going to have another print. And that other print says, and txtfld is, I'm going to say it is my alert dot text fields, and it doesn't autocomplete for me. Text fields my I don't know why I named this argument my alert. This argument should be called anything. It's basically a part of the closure, but any name other than my alert would do. I'm sorry about making such mistake. This is the argument of the closure, which is essentially the name of the returning action. So you can call it my alert action or anything such as that. But if you call it my alert, it's going to cause a confusion between this argument and the alert that you have up there. So if you have followed my steps and you have made mistake because of me, please change that to any other name. So here, when I want to print a text field, I'm going to say my alert dot text fields, and that's an array. From there, I'm going to get the very first one, and I'm going to say I know the text fields actually exist because I have added one, and then from there I'm going to get the very first one's text. So the value of the text fields zeroed dot text is what I'm going to be interested in printing every time we tap on the OK button. So let's go ahead and run this application. And now when the app loads, every time I tap, something pops that I can clear my console, and it says something happened. What would you like to do? I'm going to say hello and hit OK. It says you tapped and the text field value is hello, which is all we needed to do. And then depending on what you're trying to do, you can change these. You can have two of these text fields. I'm going to really quickly say this one is actually called pass txt flt, and then I'm going to put it in here, and maybe pass is secure text entry is true. And if I run the application now, we should be able to see two text fields. One of them is for name, the other one is for password. You can obviously add placeholders or other things in your text fields to make them more easily understandable. So that's the name, and the password is hello whatever. So that when you press the OK button, you want to read both of these and then make a decision. Have I entered the correct credentials or not? Or whatever it is that you are trying to do. So right now, when we press the OK button, we get you tapped OK. The text field, the first one is Amir. And then that's pretty much all there is to it, to making an alert controller, making it show up, as well as adding different actions. Now, I did promise you that I will show you how an action sheet alert controller will work. And that is by coming to your alert and saying the style is actually not alert, rather action sheet. Now, however, you have to keep in mind that the action sheet, as the name implies, it only accepts actions. So action sheets cannot have text fields. Because of that, I'm actually going to comment this part out, and I'm going to comment this part out. So now we have an action sheet that has two buttons on it. Let's run this, and we now should see an alert controller that essentially slides itself in from the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to come in here, say tap, and action sheet slides in from the bottom. Let's do it again. And that's how it works. And from time to time, this is more useful. This is what you want to have. And other times you want to have a dialog box right in the middle of the screen. So that's about it for alert controllers. And let's move on to our next lesson.